I have a son who is affected with partial fetal alcohol syndrome, so he doesn't have the full effects of the syndrome. He has some of the features, and he has quite a lot of the brain damage. He was actually smaller than my first child, which was the girl. And then he was a screamy baby, difficult to feed. My background was Karatani, so within that background I learned how to deal with these difficult children, and I just sort of felt this was my deal and I had to get on and look after it. He cried like a piglet and he looked like a rat. His eyes were sort of stuck on the side of his head. It was really quite... I used to hide him sometimes. He was so ugly looking. Very difficult to feed. I breastfed him for 3 months, and then I got very ill because it was so stressful. He was so slow and so hard to deal with. And I had this other child, as I said, and she was hyperactive. She was into everything. So life was hitting the fast lane for me. Through preschool, I was involved with play centre and things like that, so I knew that his development, he was meeting his milestones quite well. Speech not at all. The problems, he was different, very different. I was continually back to the doctors all the time saying, this child is different, why is he different? When he went to school, he was at school 3 days, and I had a call from the headmaster or headmistress at the school to say, Mrs. Davison, I don't know how someone could live with a child for 5 years and not know he's retarded. Well, you'd be disgusted with that, but I was so delighted that finally someone was seeing what I was seeing. I didn't see I was an idiot. I thought there is something wrong with this boy. And so I then rang my doctor and said, I told you so. And then he berated me because I listened to someone who's not trained in the medical profession, and then he rang her and berated her as well. Schooling was sort of okay, survived, but once he got into 7, 8, 9, 10, the gap really widened for him, and the behaviour started to get a little bit more clownish. So they'll either get very aggressive in schools when they don't cope, or they'll become the class clown. He came the class clown. But anyway, so that was little incidents there. Then we get up into the teen years, and I didn't have the problems that a lot of people have with drugs and stuff like that. He never hit alcohol till he was about 17, 18. He had a job cleaning a swimming pool at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he'd get up and go to that, no problems at all. So that was fine. And then once he sort of hit the alcohol, that's when things really started to come apart. And we had people come to our house at one stage. He was working at the swimming pool, and when he was away at a championship meet once, they came and said, look, we think he's stealing from us. And I'm blown away. This guy's earning $9 an hour, which was a good wage at those days. Why would he steal? And you know, I mean, every now and again I'd see my daughter steal a chocolate or something, and she'd always leave the wrappers around, and you'd know it. But Philip, you'd never see anything, no evidence of stealing food or anything like that, you see. So I just sort of thought, oh, well, I said, well, I'll keep an eye out for it. But apparently it had been going on for some time. When we did get the diagnosis, and the stealing was very obvious, my eldest daughter says, oh, Mum, he's been doing it for years. But I just didn't see it. So, but my daughter did. She saw the stealing. So that had been going on for a few years, quite a few years. So anyway, 18, he started to really get into strife. We were having police visits and all of that stuff to our house. And one particular night I was watching a movie called Broken Cord, and it was during that movie I was thinking, oh, I've been here. And it was about a young boy who had fetal alcohol, and never heard about it in my life before. Well, quite a lot of the stuff that was happening with this child, he wasn't connecting consequences, his learning was a difficulty, slow to pick up social cues, things like that. But then was one particular scene when the one said to the other, my son steals from me and I don't know why. And at that point in time in our life, the stealing was just phenomenal, and we couldn't understand it. We just couldn't. We'd catch him, we'd check it out, get our money back, whatever, and he would just go and do it again. And it was just breaking our heart. And I'd even taken him to a psychiatrist because we just didn't know what to do with this. But anyway, so once that sort of scene was in the movie, and I'm putting this all together, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder what this is, fetal alcohol. So by then we realised it was to do with drinking, because that was what was in the movie, sort of thing. And so after the movie had finished, my husband wasn't with me, so I went down to where he was and I explained this movie to him, and I said, we need to find out about this. And he's sitting there and he goes, well, I hear what you're saying, but you didn't drink much. And I said, I know I didn't drink much, but I drank. How much can do the damage? We don't know. So we need to ask the questions about this. The next morning, after Bruce had gone to work, I got the yellow pages out and I just looked for anything to do with alcohol. And I came across Alcohol Health Watch. And so I rang up, and it was Christine's predecessor, and I spoke with her and I just said, look, we were just wondering if a small amount of alcohol could do damage to the child, and explained we were having a few issues. And she said, look, I really think you should come see me if you can. And by this stage, he's 20, we've got a book like this on him. So I picked up my book and off I went and spent some time with her, and she was wonderful. And she said, look, I really think you need to go on further to Dr. Marks. So she arranged the appointment for me. We decided that I would go on my own first because he's now 20. I can't very well say to him, I think there's something a bit odd about you. You need to come with me. So I went along first and explained to her everything that was happening and what have you, and showed her the pictures that we had of him, because a lot of the diagnosis comes from the photos and stuff like that. And so she looked at it and she said, oh, I really need to see him. But she said, I think you've got a concern here. So that was the hard bit then. We had to then go home, well, I did, and have to tell our son what this was all about. So we had a family group there, my husband and myself. I'm not sure if my youngest daughter was there at the time. I think this may have been just Philip, and explained to him basically that what we were thinking might have happened. And he was absolutely fine about it. I think it was relief in a way too, to think that why am I so different to other people? And he was excellent. And I said, well, would you come in with me? And he said, yeah, no problem. So we went in, and she went off, and Rosie spoke with Philip for quite some time and came out, and then he stayed out and I went in, and she said yes, that she would definitely diagnose him with fetal alcohol. And instead of being devastated, I was so relieved that we finally had something that we could put a handle on. It's just not knowing what you're dealing with was so hard. But now we had something that we could deal with, and my journey for what had happened to him is ongoing. It doesn't stop. And it's just something that I have to learn to live with and to deal with. No mother ever goes out there to damage their child in any way whatsoever. So it's, what can you do now to make it better? What can you do to help? And so this is one of the things I can do to help, is to talk to other women, to say, this happens, it's totally preventable, it's lifelong. He's 38 years old, he still has it. So we just have to help the environment that he's in to keep him safe. He's very gregarious and just really wants to have friends, and they'll do anything for friends. And a lot of his friends have our gardening tools. He just sort of hands things out and says, that's fine. We bought him a stereo for his birthday, a really lovely stereo when he was quite old, and he handed that on to somebody else because he thought he could get insurance for it, you see. Oh no, you take it, I'll just claim insurance. It didn't happen because he'd moved houses and we hadn't changed the insurance policy, so he was only covered under our house, so it didn't work for him, but he'd figured it out. Yeah, so he's a pretty smart person. Yeah, with the stealing is to really start to understand that the stealing is definitely the brain damage. And it's a teratogen, it's permanent and irreversible. The brain damage will not go away. So the stealing won't go away, it'll be there forever. You can hit them as much as you like, you can put them in prison for long as you like. When they come out, when they get over their belting or whatever, they will do it again if the opportunity presents itself. They do not connect ownership at all. So if I'm sitting here with my handbag, I own the handbag. If I move away from my handbag, it doesn't belong to anybody. That's the way they just don't connect. All right, so that's free. You can take that. Okay, so that's how they connect it. So you've got to be careful with what you've got. All the connections have been broken within the brain, so that's the front lobal damage that's been done. And it's the brain damage that's happened, and it happens with the lying as well. It is the same thing, is that we see lying as people making up stories and what have you. These children, adults, will hear a story and totally believe it's theirs. and they will repeat it like it's their story, and then they head up for lying. People say, you know, and when you get people who want to have friends, and the only friends they'll have are the ones that you don't want them to have, and they're in trouble with the law and all sorts of things, these kids can end up in police stations and they're owning up to things that they didn't do, purely because they think it's a great thing to do because this person said so or whatever. They've got no idea how to not lie. The lies are just part of their life. So stealing and lying go hand in hand with them. Definitely. Many years ago, there was a drug called thalidomide on the market for women who were suffering from morning sickness, and then their children were being born without the limbs. And so they call it teratogen because the effects of that drug are permanent and irreversible. And alcohol has that same label. It is a teratogen. So whatever effects it has on the fetus are permanent and irreversible. So the brain damage that the child suffers cannot be repaired. When I was younger, before I knew about fetal alcohol, if I was asked by paediatricians and what have you, when I was searching for information on Philip, they would go through my history and they would ask me if I drank in my pregnancy, and I would say, no, not really, I'm just a social drinker. You see, wine wasn't alcohol to me, it was my culture. We were business people, basically entertaining, that sort of thing. And also too, alcohol was very much around us at our social times, birthdays, Christmas. And if you think of Philip's time of gestation, would have been over the Christmas New Year period. Straight after Christmas is my husband and mother-in-law's birthday. Straight after that is my mother's birthday. You know, so it goes on until the time he's born. So in all those times, I would have sat down with the family and had wine. I don't know how much wine. I'd probably drink maybe 1-2 glasses, but also in our time, I don't know if that happens now, but when we went out for dinner, they would come along and keep filling your glass up all the time, so I would never be able to say how many glasses I had because they never let you empty a glass. It was always seen that you needed to fill the glass up.